Some places don't die. They don't collapse into rot and ruin the way you'd expect. They don't surrender to the weeds and the weather and the slow creeping indifference of time. Instead, they wait. They hold their breath in the dark. They keep a coal burning in some deep inner chamber where no one can see it, and they wait for the one person who was always meant to find them. I didn't know that when I first heard about the forge. I didn't know much of anything, to be honest. I was 19 years old. I had a worn-out pack on my back, a bruise on my jaw that was still tender to the touch, and a crumpled scrap of parchment with a hand-drawn map pressed into my palm like an insult. My stepmother had given it to me at midnight. That's the part that still gets to me, even now. Not the words she said, not the way she looked at me when she said them, but the hour. She waited until the deep black of night, until the house was still and the village outside was silent, until there was no one around to witness what she was doing. And then she came to my room, the small room in the back of the house, the room that had always felt like an afterthought. And she knocked exactly once and opened the door before I could answer. I want you to think about someone in your own life for a moment. Someone who made you feel like your existence was a burden they were barely tolerating. Someone who could look right at you and see nothing worth keeping. If that name or that face came to mind just now, then you already understand something about the way Vora looked at me that night. And I think you'll understand this story in a way that goes deeper than just the words. If this is your first time here, welcome. This channel exists for people who have been written off, handed the scraps, and told to be grateful for it. Hit that subscribe button if you believe that sometimes the thing they discard is the most valuable thing of all. Because that's what this story is about. Every single word of it. Her name was Vora. Vora of the Iron Tusk clan. She was tall in the way that all Iron Tusk orcs were tall. Built like something that had been forged rather than born, with shoulders that blocked the door frame and eyes the color of old iron, flat and gray and impossible to read. She had been my father's second wife for 11 years, and in all that time, I could count on one hand the number of times she had looked at me without that expression, that careful, measured look of a woman calculating exactly how much tolerance a situation required and giving it no more. I was her husband's son from his first marriage. That was all I had ever been to her. She dropped the parchment on the foot of my bed. She didn't hand it to me. She dropped it, the way you drop something you want to be rid of. Your father's affairs are settled, she said. Her voice was low. Even now, in her worst moments, Vora never raised her voice. She didn't have to. The house, the tools, the trade contracts, they passed to me and to my sons by his written word. You have no legal claim to any of it. I was sitting up in bed, still half asleep, my heart already hammering because nothing good ever came from a knock at this hour. I looked at the parchment, but I didn't pick it up yet. There is one thing, she continued, that he left specifically to you. I looked at her. A forge, she said, out in Ashvale Canyon, east of here, 2 days on foot, past the old gray stone marker. He owned the land and the structure both. It's yours by deed. She paused. It's been abandoned for 20 years. The canyon walls have been shifting. Half the roof is probably collapsed by now. The land is dry rock, no water source, no farmable soil. There's no road that goes directly to it. The deed is worth less than the parchment it's written on. She looked at me then, and for just a moment, just a fraction of a second, I thought I saw something pass across her face. Something that wasn't quite the flatness I was used to. Something almost like unease. He said you'd go to it, she said, quieter now. He said you'd understand when you got there. Then she was gone. The door closed behind her with a soft, final click. I sat in the dark for a long time, holding that parchment, staring at the lines my father had drawn in his own hand. His handwriting was unmistakable, heavy strokes, slightly uneven, the hand of a man who spent more time holding a hammer than a quill. He had been dead for 3 weeks. I had not finished grieving him. I suspected I wouldn't for a very long time, but underneath the map, in smaller letters, almost as if he had written them quickly and then almost reconsidered, were 6 words that changed everything. Go alone. Tell no one. First. That last word. First. Not just go alone. First. Go alone. As if going alone was only the beginning. As if after the first visit, the rules would change. As if the place itself would tell me when it was time to do something different. I picked up my pack from the corner. I had already started keeping it partially loaded, the way you do when you've always known a day was coming. Clothes, a water skin, dried food wrapped in cloth, a small knife my father had pressed into my hand 2 months before he died. He hadn't explained it. He had just looked at me and said, "Keep this. You'll know when." I had thought he was rambling, the way he sometimes did in those last weeks when the sickness had worn him thin. Now I wasn't so sure. I didn't say goodbye to Vora. I didn't say goodbye to her sons, my stepbrothers, who had never bothered to learn to look at me without their mother's expression, already borrowed and worn on their own faces. I pulled open the back window, dropped down into the yard, and walked into the dark. I didn't look back at the house. I found I didn't want to. The first morning on the road, I had time to think. My name is Cale. My father was Durin, a forge master of some small reputation in Stone Marrow and the surrounding settlements. He worked iron and steel, built gate hinges and plow blades, and occasionally, when the commission was right, weapons. He was half orc, which meant I was something that didn't have a clean name. Too green to pass for human in most places, too slight in the jaw to pass for full orc in others. I had grown up in the particular loneliness of an in-between space, belonging fully to neither world, accepted grudgingly by both. My mother, my birth mother, I had never known. Durin didn't speak of her. When I was small, I asked him once, and he looked at me with an expression I couldn't interpret at the time. Something layered and complicated and held very carefully in check. She was brave, he said. She was the bravest person I ever knew, and she had enemies who would have hurt her through you if they knew you existed. So we keep you safe by keeping you quiet. He said nothing else. I stopped asking. Vora came into our lives when I was 8. She was a widow from the Iron Tusk clan, a powerful network of orc families whose influence stretched across 6 settlements and 3 trade roads. She had resources and connections, and a manner that brooked no argument. My father seemed, if not happy with her, then steady. She ran the house efficiently and kept her sons in line, and never, in 11 years, raised her hand to me. She simply made it very clear, in ways that required no physical violence at all, that I was not her son, not her responsibility, and not her concern. My father tried to bridge the distance between us when he could. When he couldn't, he at least made sure I always had food and a roof. It was not warmth, but it was not nothing. When he died, what little I'd had evaporated overnight. I walked east. The road out of Stone Marrow was well traveled for the first hour, packed dirt between low stone walls, other travelers heading to market or to the river crossing. By mid-morning, it had thinned to a track. By afternoon, it had become a suggestion. By the time the sun was dropping behind the ridgeline, I was picking my way over loose shale with nothing but the map in my hand and my father's handwriting to follow. Ashvale Canyon. I had heard the name before, vaguely. The way you hear the name of a place that exists at the edge of the world other people occupy. Adults mentioning it in low voices. A story about a mining operation that had failed there decades ago. Something about the rock formations being unstable. Something about the canyon having a quality to it that people didn't like. Nothing they could articulate, just a collective preference to stay away. I made camp at the base of the ridge that first night and lay on my back looking up at the stars, thinking about my father's voice. Go alone. Tell no one. First. He had known he was going to die before he could take me there himself. He had known, and so he had written the map, and he had trusted that I would follow it. I fell asleep with the parchment folded against my chest. On the second day, I became aware that I was not alone on the road. It started as a feeling, that specific, unmistakable pressure between the shoulder blades that means someone behind you is watching. I stopped twice to drink from my water skin and used the pause to look back along the path without being obvious about it. Both times I saw nothing. But the feeling didn't leave. It settled in and rode with me for the better part of the afternoon, patient and silent, and by the time the canyon mouth came into view, it had become a certainty. Someone was following me. Or rather, someone was following the same path I was following, at roughly the same pace, at a distance careful enough to stay out of sight, not attacking, not announcing themselves, just present, watching. I didn't stop. I kept moving, but my hand found the knife at my belt and stayed there. The canyon arrived before sunset on the second day. I had expected something bleak. Vora had described it as dry rock and collapsed structures, and the way she had said it, flat, factual, indifferent, had painted a picture of a dead place, a place that had given up. I had braced myself for that, for the particular weight of arriving somewhere and finding nothing of value, finding only the confirmation of everything that had already been taken from you. What I found instead stopped me at the canyon mouth for a long moment, unable to do anything but stand there and stare. The canyon walls rose on either side of me in smooth curves of dark amber stone, streaked through with veins of deep red and pale gray. The rock caught the last of the day's light and held it, glowing faintly, so that the whole passage seemed lit from within. The air inside the canyon was different from the air outside it, warmer, quieter, as if the walls were cupped hands holding something in. The canyon floor was narrow but clear, swept clean by decades of wind, and the path through it was unmistakable, worn smooth by the feet of people who had come this way before me and come regularly. At the end of the canyon, maybe 300 paces from where I stood, was the forge. It was not collapsed. It should have been. By all the logic of a structure left empty for 20 years in shifting geological terrain, the walls should have bowed. The roof should have come down. The whole thing should have settled into a pile of rubble with weeds growing up through the cracks. Instead, it stood clean and intact, its stone walls dark with old soot but solid, its iron roof, iron, not wood, which was unusual enough on its own, untouched by rust, glinting dully in the fading light. The chimney rising from the back was squat and thick, and from it, barely visible against the pale sky, rose the thinnest possible thread of smoke. I stopped walking. I looked at that smoke for a long time. No one lived here. Vora had said so. The land was mine by deed, inherited from my father, abandoned for 2 decades. There was no one here to light a fire. And yet, I walked the rest of the way slowly. My hand was still on the knife. The feeling between my shoulder blades had not gone away. If anything, it had intensified, pressing harder, as if whatever was behind me had drawn closer now that we were both funneled into the narrow canyon. The forge door was a heavy slab of iron-banded oak, old and dark with age. There was no handle on the outside, no latch, no lock. Just the flat face of old wood and iron banding, and a gap at the bottom where I could see the faint warmth of light from within. I put my palm flat against the door. I don't know why I did that instead of knocking. It was not a conscious decision. It felt more like an instinct, like reaching for something you didn't know you were about to need. My hand touched the wood, and the wood was warm, not from sunlight, which had not touched this face of the door, but from something radiating outward from the interior, a deep, even warmth. The door swung inward, not outward, inward. There was no latch mechanism on the outside. There never had been. This door was designed to open only from within, and yet it had opened at my touch, smoothly and without resistance, as if it had simply been waiting for my specific hand on its specific surface. I stood in the doorway and looked inside. The forge was a single large room, high-ceilinged for its footprint, with the main hearth taking up the entirety of the back wall. The hearth was cold. No fire burned in it. No coal glowed. But the room was warm, deeply and evenly warm, in a way that had nothing to do with the hearth. The walls were hung with tools, not the haphazard collection of a man who accumulates over years and never organizes, but a deliberate arrangement, every tool placed with intention. Hammers of 6 different sizes, tongs, punches, chisels, files and rasps arranged in rows, a grinding wheel in the corner, its stone worn smooth from use, a quench tank against one wall, filled with water that should have been stagnant and green after 20 years, but was clear and still. An anvil in the center of the room, massive and dark, its surface worn to a mirror finish from decades of work. Everything was clean, not dusty clean, not the grudging cleanliness of a place where someone has swept recently. Clean in the way of a place that is tended, regularly and carefully, by someone who understands that a workspace is a living thing and must be treated accordingly. The tools gleamed dully on the walls. The floor was swept. The quench water was fresh. Someone was taking care of this place. Someone had been taking care of it for a very long time. I stepped inside slowly, turning in a circle, trying to take it all in. There was a workbench along the left wall, heavy and scarred with use, and above it, on a series of iron hooks, hung what I would come to understand was my father's personal collection. The pieces he kept, not because they were profitable, but because they mattered to him. A set of tongs that had been repaired 3 times and repaired beautifully, the patches worked seamlessly into the original metal. A hammer with a handle worn to the exact shape of a large hand, smooth where the grip had always been. Small things, humble things, but kept with a care that meant something. And at the center of the workbench, on a cloth that had been folded and placed beneath it with deliberate precision, was a blade. Not a finished blade, not a weapon ready for use. Something in the last stages of its making, the shape fully formed, the edge partially worked, the fuller groove running down the center cut clean and true, but the final finishing absent. No edge polish, no balance adjustment, the grip tang bare of any wrapping, a blade that had been brought right to the edge of completion and then stopped, mid-process, as if the smith had put it down for a moment and never returned. Beside it, folded once and placed with the same deliberate care as the cloth beneath the blade, was a piece of parchment. I crossed to the workbench. My legs felt strange, as if the floor beneath them was not entirely solid. My mouth was dry. There was something in the air here, not a smell, not quite a sound, but a quality of presence that pressed on the edges of my awareness, as if the room was watching me as much as I was watching it. I picked up the parchment. My father's handwriting again, the same heavy, uneven strokes. But these letters were different from the map he had left with Vora, smaller, more careful, as if he had written slowly, measuring each word. I have carried this secret for 19 years, and I am running out of time to carry it further. This blade is yours, Kale. It was always going to be yours. I began it 17 years ago, and I have not been able to finish it, because it cannot be finished by my hands. I did not understand that at first. I thought I was simply making a weapon. It took me a long time to understand what I was actually making, and for whom. Your mother did not leave us. I sent her away. This is the truth I have kept from you, and the shame I will carry to whatever comes after this life. Her name is Sarath. She is of the Ashblood clan. When you were born, the Iron Tusk clan, Vora's people, learned that she had taken a mate outside the clan and borne a child. Among the Iron Tusk, the bloodline laws are absolute. A child of mixed clan blood in their territory is a claim that can be used as leverage. Vora's first husband had just died, and she was looking for a path to stability. She offered me a bargain: take her as wife, give her household and legitimacy, and the Iron Tusk clan would leave Sarath alone. Leave you alone. If I refused, they would come for her, and through her, for you. I accepted. I sent your mother away. I told her it was the only way to keep you safe, and she believed me because she trusted me, and I used that trust against her. She left. She went back to the Ashblood clan, and I have had no word of her since. I have been trying to reach her for 2 years. I believe she is alive. I believe she is out there. But my letters do not arrive, and my messengers do not return, and I am dying, and I am running out of time. This blade was forged from Ashblood iron, ore that came from the Ashblood clan's sacred mine, given to me by your mother before she left as a parting gift. I have shaped it as far as I can, but the final work, the work that seals it and makes it what it's meant to be, can only be done by the hands of her blood. Not my blood. Hers. You have her hands, Kyle. You have always had her hands. Finish the blade. You will know how. And when you do, show it to the Iron Tusk clan. Show it to Vora. Because what I could never tell you before, what I need you to know now, is this. This blade carries the mark of the Ashblood blood oath that was made between our 2 clans 40 years ago, before the Iron Tusk violated it and buried the evidence. The blade is the evidence. It has always been the evidence. The ore itself holds the oath mark. It was smelted with it. If the blade is finished, the mark is complete and legible, and the oath cannot be denied. Your mother is safe as long as the Iron Tusk believe this forge is abandoned and this blade is unfinished. The moment the blade is complete, everything changes. I am sorry, son. I am sorry for all of it. The forge is yours. It has always been yours. Go find her." I read the letter 3 times. The third time, my hands were shaking. Now, if you've been with this channel for a while, you know that I don't tell stories about simple people in simple situations. I tell stories about the moments when everything you thought you understood about your own life turns over like a stone, and something living and complicated is found underneath. If that's the kind of story that resonates with you, the kind where the truth is messier and more important than the lie it replaced, please hit that subscribe button right now, because there is so much more of this story to get through, and you don't want to miss where it goes. I set the letter down on the workbench with the same careful deliberateness my father had used placing the cloth beneath the blade. I stood there in the warm, watched silence of the forge, and I thought about 19 years. 19 years of not knowing. 19 years of believing that my mother had simply gone, had chosen not to stay, had weighed me against some other consideration, and found me wanting. It is one of the oldest wounds a person can carry, the belief that a parent who is absent chose to be absent. I had carried it so long, it had become structural, built into the way I held myself, the way I expected people to leave, the way I had learned to need nothing and no one, because needing things from people only showed them where you were soft and gave them something to push against. My mother had not left me. My father had sent her away to protect me, and Vora had used that protection as a chain. I picked up the blade. The metal was cool in my hands, heavier than I expected for its size. The ashblood ore was dense, richer than the common iron I was used to handling. The shape of it was clean and balanced, the fuller groove running true. I turned it slowly in what little light came through the forge's single narrow window, and I could see, faintly, along the flats of the blade, the faintest tracery of a pattern. Not decorative. Something structural in the metal itself. Something that had come from the ore and not from my father's tools. A pattern that was almost a symbol, almost legible, but not quite. Like a word written in a language you almost know, hovering at the edge of comprehension. My father had written, "You have her hands." I held the blade and I thought, I don't know how to finish this. I have never worked a forge in my life. I have watched my father work, watched him for years, stood at the edge of the fire and observed the way his hands moved. But watching is not knowing. Knowing is in the muscle, in the burn, in the years of repetition that teach the hands what the mind cannot fully articulate. I held the blade and thought all of that, very clearly and logically. And then my hands, moving without instruction from my conscious mind, reached for the whetstone on the workbench. The feeling was strange, not automatic, not like sleepwalking, more like remembering, like reaching for a word that had been on the tip of your tongue for a very long time and finally finding it. My fingers closed around the whetstone, and the angle at which I held it against the blade's edge was simply correct, immediately and without doubt. The motion of the stroke, heel to tip, maintaining the bevel, was there in my hands before I thought it, a knowledge that had been waiting in my body for an occasion to be needed. I worked in silence. The forge was very still around me. Outside, the last of the daylight was going. I had been working for perhaps half an hour, the whetstone whispering steadily against the blade's edge, when the sound came from the doorway. Not a knock, Not a voice. A single quiet footstep on the stone threshold, and then stillness. I did not drop the blade. I did not reach for the knife at my belt. I turned slowly, deliberately, and I looked at the figure standing in the doorway of the forge. He was large, orc large, the kind of build that announced itself before the face did. Dark green skin, scarred across one cheekbone, with the distinctive deep-set eyes and heavy brow of the Ashblood clan. I could see it now, in a way I couldn't have named before reading my father's letter, but that was suddenly as obvious as a language I had spoken my whole life without knowing its name. He was wearing a traveling cloak, dark and plain, and he carried nothing visible in his hands. He stood in the doorway looking at me with an expression that was not threatening and not gentle and not easily described. The expression of a man who has been preparing for a specific moment for a very long time and has now arrived at it and is not sure, in the living reality of it, how to begin. He looked at my face, at my hands, at the blade in my hands. "You have her eyes," he said. His voice was low and careful, like someone who has learned to measure every word before releasing it. I couldn't be certain from a distance, but now I can. I said, "Who are you?" It was not a question. My voice was steadier than I felt. He said, "My name is Gren. I am Sarath's brother." A pause. "I am your uncle." The silence in the forge was complete. Even the sound of the canyon outside seemed to pull back. "I have been looking for you for 4 years," he said. "Since the first letter your father sent went missing, I began trying to find you on my own. It took time I didn't have and roads I couldn't afford, and more than one dead end." He looked at the blade again. "He told me about the forge, in the last letter that actually arrived, carried by hand, by someone I trusted. He said you would come here. He said if I found the forge, I would find you." I said, "Is she alive?" Gren looked at me for a long moment. His jaw was tight. The scar on his cheek pulled slightly with the tension. "Yes," he said. "She is alive." The breath I let out was not a breath I had known I was holding. It was something larger than that. Something that had been compressed in my chest for 19 years and had finally, just now, found a way out. I set the blade carefully back on its cloth. I pulled the stool from beneath the workbench and sat down. My legs had made the decision before I had. "Tell me," I said, and he did. Gren sat on the edge of the quench tank and spoke for a long time. He spoke slowly and without embellishment, the way a person speaks when the facts themselves are heavy enough not to need decoration. Sarath had returned to the Ashblood clan 19 years ago with nothing. No mate, no child, no explanation she was permitted to give. The blood oath laws of the Ashblood were old and intricate, and a woman who left a household under iron tusk pressure was not simply welcomed back. She had been tested and questioned and ultimately accepted, but at a cost. A period of exile within the clan itself, a reduction in standing that had taken years to rebuild. She had rebuilt it. She was, Gren said, currently a senior warrior elder of the Ashblood. She had influence and respect, earned through 2 decades of service and patience. She had never stopped trying to find me. The Iron Tusk clan had made it difficult, not through overt action. They were too politically careful for open interference in another clan's affairs, but through the quiet machinery of influence, intercepted messages, delayed trade agreements that prevented Ashblood travelers from passing certain roads, whisper campaigns that made Sarath's inquiries seem unstable, obsessive, the fixation of a woman who had made her choices and couldn't accept them, None of it provable. All of it effective. "The blood oath," I said when he paused. "My father wrote about it. Tell me what it is." Gren's expression shifted, something settling in it, something becoming more serious than it had already been. 40 years ago, he said, the Ash Blood clan and the Iron Tusk clan shared a border territory, the Grey Vein Range. Both clans had mineral rights in the region. Rather than go to war over it, the clan elders of the time negotiated a blood oath, the highest form of binding agreement in Orc law. Witnessed by 3 neutral parties, sealed in ore from both clans' sacred mines, recorded in a blade that was forged from both ores mixed together. The terms were clear. Joint mineral rights in the Grey Vein, shared equally, with neither clan having the right to exclude the other or to transfer ownership to any outside party. And the Iron Tusk violated it, I said. 22 years ago, Gren said. They sold the Grey Vein mineral rights to a human trading consortium. A great deal of coin changed hands. The Ash Blood received nothing. And the evidence of the oath, the sealed blade that had been held in Iron Tusk custody as part of the agreement, disappeared. The Iron Tusk claimed it had been lost. The Ash Blood had no copy, no independent record that could stand up to Iron Tusk denials. Without the blade, the oath could not be proven. I looked at the unfinished blade on the workbench. "My father," I said slowly. "He was the smith who forged the oath blade." "He was." Gren nodded. "He was a young man then. He was commissioned by both clans jointly. A trusted neutral smith, neither clan's member. He used ore from both sacred mines, mixed in the forge. The oath mark was smelted into the ore itself, not engraved. It cannot be faked or removed without destroying the blade entirely. The Iron Tusk knew this. When they decided to violate the oath, they could not destroy the blade without admitting they had it. So they claimed it was lost and held it in secret." He paused. "What they didn't know was that your father had kept a portion of the Ash Blood ore, enough to forge a second blade, not as large as the original. He didn't have enough material for that, but enough to carry the oath mark, enough to prove the oath existed. And he never finished it," I said. "He couldn't. The oath mark in the ore, the way it becomes legible, the way it resolves from a pattern into a readable seal, requires the touch of Ash Blood blood to complete. It was built that way intentionally, a safeguard against the blade being used by anyone other than the sworn parties." Gren looked at my hands. "You are Sarath's son. You carry Ash Blood blood. Your touch will do what your father's could not." I picked up the blade again. In the growing dark of the forge, the tracery along the flats of the metal seemed more visible than it had before. Not glowing, nothing dramatic, just present, the way something becomes visible when you finally know to look for it. I understood now what my hands had been doing when they reached for the whetstone. The finishing work on this blade, the edge polish, the balance, the final refinements, was not just craftsmanship. It was completion. Every stroke of the whetstone, every pass of the polishing cloth, was drawing out what was already in the metal, bringing the oath mark to the surface, clarifying it from a buried pattern into a legible seal. My father had started it. He had shaped it as far as human and half-orc hands could take it. The last steps were mine. Before I go further, if you're watching this and you've ever inherited something you didn't understand at first, something that looked like a burden but turned out to be a responsibility, I want to hear from you in the comments. What was it? A piece of advice, a hard lesson, something passed down that didn't make sense until it did? This story is built on exactly that idea, and your stories matter here. Drop them below. And if you haven't already, please subscribe and hit the notification bell. We're just getting to the part where everything breaks open. I worked through the night. Gren built a fire in the hearth, not for the forge work, but for light and for warmth against the canyon cold that crept in as the hours moved toward midnight. He worked quietly, without getting in my way, understanding instinctively that what was happening at the workbench required a particular quality of silence and space. He made food from what he'd carried in his pack, dried meat and flatbread, which he set at the corner of the bench without comment, and which I ate without stopping the work. The blade spoke to my hands. I know how that sounds. I know it sounds like the kind of thing you say when you want to make something ordinary seem mystical, when the truth is simpler and less remarkable. But I have no better way to describe what it was like. The blade had a logic to it, a sequence of operations that revealed itself progressively, each step suggesting the next the way a sentence suggests its own conclusion. The whetstone work, the linen cloth for the first polish, a second polishing compound from a jar on the shelf above the bench, unlabeled but present, as if left exactly for this purpose. The edge work that required the smallest hammer from the wall and the finest punch, working the metal at the very last stage of the edge geometry, tapping with a precision and rhythm that I did not know I possessed until the moment I needed to. My father had said, "You have her hands." Somewhere around the third hour of the night, the pattern on the blade changed. It didn't happen all at once. It was gradual, the way dawn comes, a slow increase in definition, a gradual shift from almost to clearly. From a tracery you had to squint to see to a mark that announced itself plainly to anyone looking. The symbol that resolved on the flat of the blade was one I didn't know, an Ashblood clan mark, ancient, formal, the kind of symbol that carries legal weight in Orc tradition. It resolved on both faces of the blade simultaneously, perfectly mirrored, with the precision of something that had been waiting in the metal for exactly this. When it was complete, I set the blade down and looked at it. Gren, who had been sitting against the far wall in silence for the last 2 hours, stood up. He crossed the room and stood beside me at the workbench, looking down at the blade. His expression was something I had no name for, something between grief and relief, and a reverence I hadn't expected. "That is the Ashblood seal," he said quietly. "That is the oath mark. I have seen it only in old records, old drawings, but I know it." He exhaled slowly. "Your father built this. You completed it. Together you made something that cannot be argued with." He looked at me. "The Iron Tusk will not be pleased." "The Iron Tusk," I said, "are going to know this blade exists very soon, unless they already know." He looked at me sharply. "I was followed here," I said. 2 days on the road. Someone who knew the way to this canyon. Someone who kept their distance but didn't lose mine." Gren was quiet for a moment. Then, "How long ago did you arrive?" "Sunset yesterday." "Then they know you're here." His voice had changed, not panicked, but alert, the sharp alertness of a man reassessing a tactical situation in real time. "They would have reported back by now, or they're waiting to see what you do." He looked at the blade. "If the Iron Tusk learn the blade is finished, they'll come for it," I said. "They'll come for it," he confirmed. And for you. And for me, if they know I'm here. We looked at each other across the workbench, across the blade between us, across the 19 years that had been building to this room and this night and this conversation. Then we don't give them time, I said. Where is my mother? 3 days east, he said. The Ashblood summer camp. They've been in the region for the season, which is partly how I was able to come so quickly when your father's letter finally reached me. 3 days, I said. If we move fast. Then we move fast. I reached for the cloth and wrapped the blade carefully, methodically, the way my father would have done it. But first, is there a record in this forge? Documentation of what this blade is and what it proves? My father kept records. Every forge master does. Gren blinked. Then something shifted in his face. Yes. Yes. He mentioned records. He said the forge would hold everything. We searched. It didn't take long. My father's records were kept in a locked iron box under the hearthstone, the kind of location so obvious to a smith that it would be invisible to anyone who didn't think like one. The box held 20 years of ledgers, commission records, correspondence, and at the bottom of the stack, wrapped in oilskin that had preserved them perfectly, a set of documents relating to the Grey Vein Oath, the original commission request, signed by both clan elders. His own notes on the forging process, detailing the mixing of the ores and the sealing of the oath mark. A letter from the Ashblood elder who had commissioned him, confirming the terms of the oath and the nature of the blade. Evidence. Clean, documented, verifiable evidence. My father had been building this case for 20 years. He just hadn't been able to finish the blade. He just hadn't been able to deliver it. He had been running out of time, and he had done the only thing left to him. He had trusted me to carry it the rest of the way. We left the forge before dawn. They came for us on the second day. I had been half expecting it since we left the canyon. That particular alertness that doesn't go away once it arrives. The constant low-level awareness of the terrain around you. The way every sound becomes something to categorize. Gren moved with the practiced quiet of a warrior who had spent decades being careful, and he kept us off the main paths where he could, using the old walking routes that crossed the hill country east of Stone Marrow. He didn't explain his route decisions, and I didn't ask. I trusted his knowledge of the terrain in the same way I had trusted my hands on the blade. They caught up to us at a river crossing in the late afternoon. 4 of them, iron tusk by the look of their armband marks, wearing traveling clothes but carrying weapons openly. They moved out of the tree line at the crossing with the unhurried confidence of people who believe numbers are on their side and that the conversation will be brief. Their leader was a stocky orc woman with cropped gray hair and the kind of face that had been deliberately arranged into an expression of reasonable neutrality. The face of someone who intends to frame what's coming as a discussion rather than what it actually is. Kyle, she said, using my name, which meant they'd been following long enough to gather information. My name is Hevra. I work for the Iron Tusk Clan Oversight Council. I was hoping to speak with you about the property you recently inherited. I stood at the near side of the river crossing with the wrapped blade in my pack and my father's document box under one arm, and I looked at Hevra, and I said nothing. The forge at Ashvale Canyon, she continued pleasantly. The deed is in your name, yes, but there's a complication. The land sits within a boundary that the Iron Tusk clan has a formal claim to, dating back to a mineral rights agreement 40 years ago. Under that claim, the structure and everything in it is technically subject to clan oversight. She paused. We'd like you to come with us, to discuss the matter with the council. Bring whatever you've taken from the forge, purely as a matter of formal documentation. She meant the blade. She didn't know exactly what we had found, but she knew we had found something. The man who had been following me had reported back, and the iron tusk had moved quickly. 40 years of carefully maintained denial, and a boy with a pack had walked into a canyon and spent a night there, and now 4 armed people were standing at a river crossing, trying to use polite language to recover whatever evidence had just surfaced. Gren stepped up beside me. He was taller than all 4 of them, and he held himself with the particular stillness of someone who has been in many dangerous situations and has learned that stillness is often the loudest thing in the room. Hevra's eyes moved to him. Something behind her neutrality recalibrated. I know you, she said to him carefully. Yes, he said. You do. The Ashblood clan has no standing here, she said. This is an Iron Tusk matter. This is an Ashblood matter, Gren said. It has been for 40 years. You simply prevented us from addressing it. He looked at the 4 of them without urgency. We are not coming with you. The quality of the silence that followed was the kind that precedes a decision. I could see it in Hevra's face. The calculation, the assessment. 4-2. But one of the 2 was a senior Ashblood warrior, and the other was carrying something they needed intact, which complicated the use of force considerably. I reached into my pack, slowly, deliberately, watching their hands while I did it. I unwrapped the blade and held it out flat on both palms. In the afternoon light, the oath mark on the blade was plainly visible. 2 symmetrical seals on the facing flats of the metal, in the ancient Ashblood style that anyone with knowledge of Orc clan history would recognize without assistance. Incontrovertible, smelted into the ore itself, impossible to fake or remove or explain away. I watched Hevra's face change. The neutrality didn't crumble all at once, but something behind it shifted, definitively, the way a wall shifts when the foundation has given way. Not yet fallen, but no longer reliably standing. She looked at the blade for a long moment. Then she looked at me. The Gravine oath, she said. Quiet, almost to herself. Yes, I said. That blade was forged from Ashblood ore. The mark is real. My uncle can confirm the symbol. The documents I'm carrying will confirm the commission, the terms, and the breach. I held her gaze. The Iron Tusk sold the Gravine mineral rights 22 years ago. The oath forbade it. This blade proves the oath existed and was binding. I'm going to the Ashblood clan with this. My mother is a senior elder there. What happens next is a conversation between the clans, but it will happen, and it will happen with this evidence in the room. The silence was very long. Then Hevra took a step back. It was a small movement, but it was the decisive one. The 3 warriors behind her followed suit, half a step, reading their leader and matching her. The threat posture shifted. Not gone, not safe, but no longer the same shape. The Iron Tusk Council will want to respond, she said. They'll have the opportunity, I said, when the clans meet. She looked at me for another moment, not calculating anymore, but simply looking, with an expression I couldn't entirely read. Something almost like assessment. Something that, in another context, might have been respect. Then she and her 4 people stepped aside from the crossing, and Gren and I walked past them, through the river, and continued east. Neither of us spoke for a long time after that. When we did, Gren said only, "Your father would have been proud of that." I didn't answer, but I held the thought for the rest of the walk, turned it over, felt the weight and the warmth of it. My father, who had spent 20 years protecting a secret and building evidence and waiting for a moment he never got to see, who had trusted me with the unfinished work of his life, who had said, in 6 careful words on a scrap of parchment, everything he needed to say. Go find her. I found her on the 3rd day, as Gren had said. The Ashblood summer camp was set on a wide plain east of the hill country, a gathering of tents and fires and the sounds of a clan at work, children running between the structures, smiths and craftspeople and warriors going about the business of a community that was very much alive and very much itself. It was nothing like Stone Marrow, nothing like the cramped, half-hearted belonging of a village that had always been slightly too small to hold me. It was large and loud, and full of a particular kind of confident energy I had never seen gathered in one place before. When Gren walked into the camp with me beside him, people looked. They always look when someone arrives from outside. But the way they looked, the way their eyes went to my face and stayed there, the way some of them seemed to recognize something in my features before I had introduced myself, told me that my name had not been entirely forgotten here. She came out of a tent near the center of the camp. She was tall. She had my build, or I had hers. The same slight frame relative to full Ashblood proportions, the same way of holding the head. She had gray beginning to track through her hair and lines at the corners of her eyes, and she looked at me from 20 feet away and stopped walking. I had thought, in the days leading to this moment, about what I would say. I had composed things in my head, rearranged them, discarded them. In the end, none of it was needed. There was nothing to say that the silence between us didn't already hold. She crossed the 20 feet, and she put her hands on either side of my face, and she looked at me for a very long time. Her eyes were dark and clear, and I recognized them the way you recognize something you have always carried without knowing it. Kyle, she said. Just my name. But the way she said it, with the particular weight of a word that has been held unspoken for 19 years, that has been the shape of a missing thing for nearly 2 decades, made it something more than a name. It was a door opening. It was a key turning in a lock. Yes, I said. That was all. That was enough. The meeting between the clans happened 30 days later. It took that long to arrange. Neutral ground had to be agreed upon. Clan representatives had to travel. The formal protocols of Orc inter-clan law had to be satisfied before any substantive discussion could begin. I spent those 30 days in the Ashblood camp, learning things about who I was that I had never had the information to learn before. My mother's people were my people too, in the blood and in the bone, and they received me with a generosity that I had not known was possible, not because they were soft, but because they understood what had been taken, and they understood what it meant to return something that had been lost. I worked the forge that the Ashblood kept at their camp, a traveling forge, smaller and more pragmatic than my father's, but a forge nonetheless. I was not skilled. I was barely competent. But I worked it every day, the same way you do anything you want to become real, consistently, without romanticizing the difficulty, accepting the burns and the errors, and the slow incremental improvement as the honest cost of the thing you're becoming. My mother came and watched me sometimes, standing at the edge of the forge area with her arms crossed and an expression on her face that was not quite a smile and not quite something else. Once, she came and stood beside me and corrected the angle of my hammer on a difficult joint, her hand over mine, showing me without words what her hands had always known. My father was right. I had her hands. The clan meeting was held on neutral ground at a site in the Grey Vein Range itself, the disputed territory at the center of it all. Both clans sent representatives. Neutral witnesses came from 3 other clans, as the blood oath protocols required. I was there not as a negotiator, but as a witness and a presenter of evidence. I laid the blade on the meeting table. I laid the documents beside it. My mother stood to my right. Gren stood behind me. A senior Ashblood legal elder presented the case. The original commission, the terms of the oath, the breach, the 22 years of denied rights, the mineral wealth that had been sold away without consent. The Iron Tusk representatives had their own lawyers, their own counter-arguments, their carefully prepared alternative interpretations. But the blade was not arguable. The oath mark was not deniable. The neutral witnesses examined it and gave their assessments, and the assessments were unanimous. The mark was genuine, the oath was real, and the breach was documented. It took 2 days of formal proceedings. When it was done, the Iron Tusk clan accepted liability for the breach. The terms of the settlement included the restoration of Ashblood mineral rights in the Grey Vein Range, a formal apology entered into inter-clan legal record, and the return of all proceeds from the 22 years of illegitimate mineral exploitation, a figure that took 3 separate counting officials to tabulate. Vora was not at the meeting. She had not been a clan elder or an official party to any of it. She had been, in her own way, as much an instrument of the clan's decisions as a maker of them. I did not hate her. I had thought, during the long walks and the nights in the canyon and the 30 days in the Ashblood camp, that I might arrive at hatred and find it waiting for me. Instead, I found something more complicated and less consuming, an understanding of how systems use people and how people choose to be used by systems, and the difference between the two that determines something essential about character. She had chosen, but so had I. The forge at Ashvale Canyon is mine. I live there now for most of the year. The structure has been repaired properly, the iron roof resecured, the chimney repointed, new shutters on the window. The canyon is not as isolated as it was, or rather, I am not as isolated within it. Gren visits regularly. My mother has come 3 times, twice alone, and once with a group of young Ashblood warriors she was mentoring, who spent 2 days watching me work and asking questions with the directness that seems to be a family trait. I have learned to answer questions with the same directness. It did not come naturally. It is coming more naturally now. The blade is not here. The blade is in the Ashblood clan's formal keeping, sealed in their records vault alongside the documents from the meeting. It is evidence, and it is history, and it is in the right place. What I kept is the cloth my father had laid beneath it, the cloth he had folded and placed with such care under the unfinished thing he had built and trusted and waited to be completed. I keep it folded on the workbench where the blade used to lie. Some mornings I stand at the forge and I think about all the things that had to go wrong in exactly the right order for me to end up here. My mother sent away. My father's secret held for 2 decades. A midnight eviction. A road I had never traveled. A door that opened from the inside at my touch. A blade that spoke to hands it had been waiting for. I think about my father, standing in this room, working this iron, understanding in some deep, practiced way that he was building something he would not live to see finished, and choosing to build it anyway, choosing to believe that the right hands would find it, choosing to leave the instructions in the simplest possible terms. Go alone, tell no one, first, before the complications, before the politics and the danger and the 30 days of formal proceedings and the meeting on neutral ground. First, just come here. First, just see what is waiting for you. First, just put your hands on the thing you are meant to hold. The real inheritance was not the forge. The forge is a building, a fine one, a loved one, but a building. The real inheritance was the choice my father made to protect what was true, even when the cost of that protection was enormous. The choice to build evidence rather than accept defeat. The choice to believe that the right moment would come, even if he would not be there to see it. He gave me a place in the world, not by making things easy, by making things possible, and then trusting me to do the rest. I am a forge master's son and a warrior elder's son, and the nephew of a man who spent 4 years crossing dangerous roads to find a nephew he had never met. I am the person my parents built, through choices they made before I was old enough to understand anything. I am the finished thing that neither of them could complete alone. The forge is warm when I come in each morning. I have never been able to entirely explain that warmth. The hearth is cold most mornings before I start it, and yet the room itself is never cold. I have stopped trying to explain it. Some things you accept. Some places don't die. They wait. They keep a coal burning in some deep inner chamber, and they wait for the one person who was always meant to find them. I found mine. If you've made it this far, thank you. I mean that more than the words can hold. This is a story about inheritance, but not the kind measured in property or coin. It's about what people build for us when they're running out of time to build it themselves, and what it costs to receive it fully. It's about the places that wait for you, about the hands that know things the mind hasn't learned yet, about mothers and fathers doing imperfect things for reasons that were real, and sons and daughters eventually finding their way to the truth of it. If something in this story landed for you, if you've been handed a worthless forge, if you've been told your inheritance was nothing, if you've been kicked out of a place that was never yours and had to find the place that was, share it in the comments. Tell me what you found on the other side of that road. This community exists for exactly those stories. Hit the like button if you believe that the things we inherit are not always what they appear to be. Subscribe if you want more stories that go to the difficult places and come back with something true. And share this video with someone who needs to hear that what was given to them, even if it looked like nothing, might be exactly what they were meant to carry. The forge is warm. Come find yours.